Warning, the following ZipRecruiter radio spot you are about to hear is going to be filled with F-words.
When you're hiring, we at ZipRecruiter know you can feel frustrated, forlorn even, like your efforts are futile, and you can spend a fortune trying to find fabulous people, only to get flooded with candidates who are just fine. Fortunately, ZipRecruiter figured out how to fix all that. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. With ZipRecruiter, you can forget your frustrations because we find the right people for your roles fast, which is our absolute favorite F word. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day.
Fantastic.
So, whether you need to hire 4, 40, or 400 people, get ready to meet first-rate talent. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/zip to try ZipRecruiter for free. Don't forget, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. Finally, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
Everything from clothing to household items are getting more expensive each day. The world of fast fashion has complicated clothing production by shipping cheap parts around the world to whoever can sew them the cheapest. And now you, the consumer, are paying the price with rising costs. American Giant is about keeping things simple and close to home. They aren't affected by tariffs because their products never leave the U.S. Skip the tariff and snag yourself American-made clothing with American Giant. Get 20% off your first order when you use promo code STAPLE20 at American-Giant.com. That's 20% off when you use code STAPLE20 at American-Giant.com.
A warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got another conference preview for you today as we are going to be taking a look at the old Missouri Valley Conference, a conference that always provides a lot of fun with Arch Madness. You get some of the highest form of mid-major basketball in this conference. We always have one of the highest forms of guests available for this podcast as well, as we've got Kevin Sweeney. He does such an incredible job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love over at SI, Sports Illustrated. He also does a podcast with Eric Fawcett that's a part of the Trilly Donovan sort of interweb, that sort of network that he's got going on. And I know that he also does some great work with Field of 68. We're going to be taking a look at all 11 teams in the conference. We're going to be taking a look at the coaching changes, the rosters, and so much more. Here in the first segment, I'm going to take a look at the betting trends and the styles of play they have with this conference. And then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys my projector or finish for the Missouri Valley Conference. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever that 100% of gambling-related transactions always do get approved. And when you go to edgeboost.bet, put in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That gets you a $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. And let's get down to business, and let's take a look at a Missouri Valley Conference that had a lot of good three-point shooting last year. Now, I will say the defense for a lot of these teams was suspect. Even a team that traditionally is pretty solid on defense like Bradley took a few steps back, but with Bradley, even though the defense took a step back, the three-point shooting, that took a step up. They were number 2 in all of college basketball in three-point shooting percentage at 39.7%, just absolutely blistering there. And then you had quite a few other teams that were able to excel from beyond the arc. Belmont was 17th in the country. They shot 38.1% from three-point range. Northern Iowa, 35th in the country. They were able to knock down 36.8% of their threes. Illinois State was 30th at 37.1% from the outside, and quite a few of these teams were just as good, if not better, with their three-point shooting when they were on the road rather than at home. So, and you had a lot of teams that were very much battle-tested, a lot of teams that they were able to go out there and they were able to just pop it and lock it from three. Drake was 74th in the country in three-point shooting, though obviously you lose Ben McCollum, but you bring in Eric Henderson, who he coaches up a South Dakota State team that year in and year out. They're very rock solid with regards to their three-point shooting. Now, what you're going to notice with this conference is that not a lot of teams generate turnovers, so that's something that you do want to note. So that's why you get so many clean possessions and you get so many clean looks from three-point range, as had quite a few teams that were outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. A team like Illinois State, they just weren't generating a lot of turnovers. They were outside the top 270 with that regard. Southern Illinois, they were 306th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. You didn't have so many of these teams trying to go out there and try to generate a bunch of turnovers, like Bradley was 278th, Illinois, Chicago, UIC was 274th. So I did think that was intriguing, and you've got a lot of teams in this conference that they like to play very slow and controlled. Northern Iowa got away from that a little bit when they had Bowen Bourne, but they got right back into it last season. For Northern Iowa, they were ranking 334th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so nice, slow control basketball. That was very big for them, and it's a big reason why they were able to get back to a little bit of prominence after it had been up and down last few seasons. Now, Southern Illinois, under the tutelage of Scott Nagy, they're very much sped up. They had been a bottom 30 team in terms of total possessions per game the last few years. They sped up, but Illinois State, they were 313th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Played very slow, very methodically to be able to get their shots and be able to get their good looks from three-point range. So they were another one of those teams that was pretty slow and control. Bradley was 277th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Evansville was 265th. Murray State was 264th in the country. Belmont is always a team that likes to play a bit more up-tempo, so they're a little bit of an outlier with this regard, as you do have a lot of these teams outside the top 200, but Belmont, they very much do like to run and gun it, and Indiana State has emerged as one of those teams as well. For Belmont, they were 84th in the country in terms of total possessions per game last year, and for Indiana State, they were clocking in 14th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So you do have a little bit of variance of styles. We've been noticing that a bit more ever since the NIL era really began, and when it comes to this conference and taking a look at the betting trends, it's a relatively good conference with regards to travel. It's not overly spread out. Obviously, it's expanded a little bit since a few years ago when you added in there the great state of Tennessee with Belmont, you added in there Kentucky with Murray State, but still, it's not like some of these harebrained and crazy conferences, to say the least. But if you take a look at how these teams fared against the spread last season, you had yourself a big money earner in Illinois State, 21-14 against the spread. That was pretty rock solid, and you really didn't have too many bottom teams. Murray State was your worst team against the spread, 13-17-1. Southern Illinois was 14-16-1 against the spread. No other team was more than one game below 500 against the spread, as UIC, Illinois, Chicago, Evansville, Bradley, all these teams were one game below 500. Northern Iowa was a rock solid team against the spread at 19-13 against the spread. Missouri State, who's no longer in there, they were able to go 16-13-1 against the spread, but you had a lot of teams that were right around about one or two games above 500 with regards to their against the spread record. So I think these teams, they performed relatively well in the non-con. You only had 4 teams go below 500 in non-conference play against the spread. Evansville was not good in their non-conference games. They were 2-8 against the spread. And then you had Indiana State, Murray State, Southern Illinois all go either 4-5 or 4-5-1 against the spread in non-conference games, and you had 5 teams hit at least 60% against the spread in non-conference games. Drake was able to go 6-4. You had Illinois, Chicago go 5-3, 6-3-1 for Belmont, 10-3 for Illinois State, and then Missouri State, who's again no longer in the conference, 7-2 against the spread there. And a big reason why is that these teams were able to do a very rock-solid job on the road. You only had one team cover fewer than 50% of their road games last season. That was Evansville at 7-8 against the spread on the road. This was very much a conference where you were rewarded if you laid the points / took the points with the road teams, as UIC, Illinois, Chicago was your top team at 9-4 against the spread. Illinois State 8-4 against the spread. Belmont 8-5 against the spread. 6-4 for Drake. 7-5 / 7-5-1 for Missouri State. Southern Illinois, Bradley 6-5 against the spread for Northern Iowa. Indiana State goes 7-6 against the spread on the road, and then Murray State Valparaiso break even 6-6-1. So that was something that very much stood out to me. And then if you're taking a look at the totals in this conference, I just laid it out. You do have quite a few slow and controlled teams, but you've also got some teams that were very lethal from three-point range. And Indiana State, the fastest team in the conference, top 20 team in terms of total possessions per game. Well, they cashed you a whole heck of a lot of overs last season. 22 overs to 8 unders. And if you're taking a look at overall over rate in college basketball, the only teams that cash a higher percentage of their games to the over, Temple at 23-8 to the over, go Owls, and Lemoyne 24-7 to the over. North Florida was also 22 overs and 8 unders. Same goes for South Dakota, but this team was able to really light it up, and you were able to get a whole bunch of overs with them. Now, you did have a few underwhelming teams in this conference as well, as the biggest of them was Northern Iowa. How about them them going 21 unders to 11 overs. Last season, Drake, obviously with Ben McCollum taking over 20 unders to 13 overs, and there were quite a few of those games that went over thanks to overtime, so they were one of those teams that really like to slow it down. And then Illinois State, with their good three-point shooting, even though they didn't play fast, they were very good to the over as well. 22 overs, 11 unders, and 2 pushes, and it made things very intriguing in terms of the conference games that you got out of these teams, because you only had 2 teams have more than one game go over the total rather than the under, so you only had a differential that was north of 1 with 2 of these teams. Illinois State 14 overs to 8 unders, and then Indiana State 14 overs to 7 unders. Now, had a lot of teams that went 11 overs to 10 unders. Missouri State, UIC, Illinois, Chicago, Murray State, they were all there, and then Valparaiso 12 and 11 to the over, Belmont in a break-even 11 overs to 11 unders, and then you had 3 pretty demonstrative teams to the under. Drake 9 overs, 14 unders, Bradley 9 overs to 14 unders, and then Northern Iowa 8 overs to 13 unders. So very intriguing there, as all 3 of those teams that were very good under teams, they were all inside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, and Indiana State was obviously your harebrained and crazy team. So it's a little bit of the lay of the land that we've got out there in the Missouri Valley Conference. In my opinion, just one of the most elite mid-major conferences that you're going to find in all of college basketball. And a man that is elite at being able to take a look at this great game of college basketball, that'd be Kevin Sweeney. We're going to be taking a look at all 11 of these teams, breaking down the roster moves, breaking down the coaching changes, and so much more with him on the flip side right here on Cuts Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beats and Family Podcast, the Missouri Valley Conference Preview Edition.
This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
And we're back in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beats and Family Podcast. It's the Missouri Valley Conference Preview Edition, and always have to get this man aboard. He does such great work over at Sports Illustrated, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he does a little bit of work with Trilly Donovan's site/app as well. He does a tremendous job on that front. He's over at the Field of 68. He hosts a show called the Scout Team Podcast with Eric Fawcett. So this man does an amazing job of taking a look at this incredible game of college basketball. As we do have Kevin Sweeney aboard. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at CBB_Central. And Kevin, it's a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
What's going on, Greg? Appreciate you having me.
I appreciate you joining me, Kevin. And Kevin, we've got ourselves a lot of fun to take a look at in the Missouri Valley Conference. So how about if we stay on your state of Illinois? Because the team that I think might be the most intriguing out there is Illinois State, a team that really bombed it from three-point range last season. They had some good, clean offense going, albeit they need a little bit of rebounding. But with the likes of a Chase Walker and Johnny Kinzinger back, they bring back over half their lineup from a season ago, something that you just don't see in this day and age of college basketball. Throwing their Landon Moore and Bowden Scumberg, I think that there needs to be a lot of hype around this Illinois State team coming into the season.
Yeah, tons of excitement, and give Ryan Peden a lot of credit for finding a way to get some of these guys back. I mean, Chase Walker in particular. Like, Chase Walker was $1 million player if he entered the portal. I can tell you he got a whole lot less than that to come back to Illinois State, but I think there's a lot of value in continuity and being with the people who helped you get to where you are now. Chase Walker got to college. He was 400 pounds. Now he's, a slim 280 and is the most dominant force in the conference. I think he's the Valley Player of the Year and gives them a real chance to go win this league and get that program back to the top of the conference, which is, it's been a while, but obviously a program with a ton of history, and I know there's a lot of excitement down there right now.
Yep, absolutely. I think that this is going to be an amazing year for them. And then the other Illinois school, Illinois Chicago, I think that they're very interesting as well. As Ahmad Henderson II is going to be looking to headline the offense after averaging about 11.5 points per game. I like the add of Josiah Hammonds. He had a little bit of drop off last year over at Sam Houston State, but I remember at Lamar a few years ago, he was rock solid. You bring in a guy like an Elijah Crawford, a former top 20 recruit, and I do think that this team might struggle a little bit down low, but Ante Belgian, hopefully I got that correct, from Little Rock, should be able to help out a little bit with that as well, along with Abdul Mamo. And I feel like this is going to be a really balanced team for a guy in Rob Hassan, who I thought did a relatively solid job last year.
Yeah, I think Rob deserves a ton of credit to get them to relevancy in year one. Sort of fell flat a little at the end there, but to go 500 in the league is a monster accomplishment given where they were the last couple of years and how big an adjustment this program moving to the Valley was 3 years ago when it happened. So, yeah, the continuity with Henderson coming back is huge. And then Crawford with him in the backcourt, I think that's the offensive juice. I think the hope is that they're much better defensively. Mekhi Lowry, I think, is someone who can really make an impact with his size and athleticism. They're really high on their freshman, Andy Johnson, who's like a big wing, good defender, can make shots. So, yeah, I think still kind of working through rotations like everybody, but a group that I think they hope will continue to level up.
Yep, absolutely. I do think that it's going to be a solid year for them moving forward. As joining me on the show, we do have Kevin Sweeney. He does such great work over at SI Sports Illustrated along with the Field of 68. And I do think that this team is going to be a lot of fun to take a look at too. Belmont, because they really bombed it from three-point range last year. You had Tyler Lundblade shoot 48% from three. He's back in the fold for this team. Sam Orme, he was able to give you 9.5 points. He's a solid three-point shooter. They bring in Nick McLean, who was over at Eastern Washington last year. And while this is going to be a squad that is going to leave something to be desired on defense and perhaps on the glass, once again, this is going to be a team that's just going to look to flat-out outscore you, and they're going to have a lot of great shooters once again this year.
I mean, it's just a yearly thing with Belmont. Like, they're going to win 20 games. It's what they do. They've done it now here every year, the Casey Alexander era, 6 years running. They've done it every year as a program dating all the way back to 2010. So I see no reason why that train stops now. I do wonder a little bit about, traditional kind of point guard play with them. They added Isaiah West in the portal. I don't love that one, but I do think Nick McLean from Eastern Washington will make an impact. And then Lundblade and Sam Orme are two guys, internally that I think take a jump. Certainly Lundblade shot making, but Sam up front had a big time redshirt freshman year, I believe, and I think we'll be positioned for another big year as a sophomore.
Yep, I think that they're going to be positioned for a big year as well, and I like what I'm seeing out of Belmont, and this team was able to be a nice little surprise last year as well. Evansville, they went 8-12 in the conference, which doesn't sound like much, but that was their best mark since the 2015-16 season. Coach Ragland over there has done a good job of being able to build it up from the ground up. And Alex Hemaway, I think, might be one of the most interesting players in the conference. He played just 5 games last year over at Clemson, but when they made the NCAA tournament a few seasons ago, he was a really nice sharpshooter. They bring back Marlon Barnes, who he comes in from Pittsburgh after he was a relatively highly touted recruit. AJ Casey is coming in as well. There's a lot of guys that were former top 200 recruits on this roster. It's going to be a little bit mix and match, and I think that this roster has been very much built right, and I think that Coach Ragland has done a good job of just being able to do it just the slow and controlled way to be able to get this team back to relevance.
Yeah, I mean, obviously fighting at a somewhat of a resource disadvantage, I think, to the rest of the league. Not everyone, but they're in the bottom third, I would say, and that's made it tough. Obviously, to lose Pizzotto, who was so good as a freshman, is heartbreaking a little bit, but they've left no stone unturned hunting talent, whether it's these high major down transfers, whether it's internationally, they've done really well. They had a lot of success last year with Connor Turnbull. He'll be back and be one of the best defenders in the Valley up front. And I think hoping that guys like Casey and Marlon Barnes, maybe even Hemingway can help them with that as well in a similar way. I do think point guard play is a concern, but I look at this group and I think Ragland will find a way to get the most out of him.
Yep, I think so as well. And I love the way that Coach Ragland has been able to coach up this team, as he's done such an incredible job there. We were talking a few minutes ago about how Illinois State has so much coming back. I'm really impressed by the way that Northern Iowa has so much coming back as well. Really didn't add too much via the transfer portal, but when you bring back a guy like a Trey Campbell who's able to lead the way in assists, shot 42.5% from three. Leon Bond is someone that began his career over at Virginia, was a little bit banged up, so we'll see what he's able to do with the clean bill of health. I think that this is a Northern Iowa team that they got back to that slow and controlled style. They were outside the top 325 in terms of total possessions per game when they had Bowen Born in there. I thought that they got a little bit too fast for their own good. Getting back to that slow and controlled style, I thought was good, and I love the fact that they bring back so much from a season ago.
Yeah, and really the one key newcomer is Tristan Smith from the NII ranks at Concordia in Nebraska. He averaged 20 and a half points, 8.5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. I mean, dominant. Kind of a funky player, right? Undersized, front court guy, not a shooter, but he's someone that, I think brings some toughness. Guys like him have been successful traditionally in the Valley, like that small ball big that can kind of bully his way to the rim. I think that complements guys like Campbell, Ben Schweiger, and Leon Bond really well. So I think that's the addition to watch and the one that could potentially push them over the top from good where they were last year to potentially great.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that for Northern Iowa, they do have a good chance to be able to be, once again, that team that is towards the top of the conference. And this is a team that has not really been able to find a ton of success since coming into the Missouri Valley Conference. But I think that the moves they made in the offseason were tremendous. They hire on Ryan Miller, Murray State does, one of Creighton's top assistants, and he brings with him Frederick King, who I looked at his 4 career starts. When he had his 4 starts at Creighton, he was in there for Ryan Kalkbrenner when he dealt with an illness a few years ago. 12.5 points, 6.5 boards, 3.8 blocks per contest. I think that can really play in this conference. They bring in someone from Illinois, Chicago, and Javon Jackson, who was averaging 11.5 points per game. J.J. Trainer's coming in from DePaul. I'm feeling really good about Murray State, especially with Dylan Anderson, a guy that's able to pop it from 3 at 7 feet tall coming in too.
Yeah, I mean, look, the way I always describe it with teams that are well-resourced NIL-wise, and Murray is one of them, they had the most money in the Valley, is you notice it more when you look at the bench than the starters. Like, yes, their starting lineup is good, right? You could point out Lane Taylor, who averaged 17 a game at Central Arkansas, or Fred King, who I think, as you alluded to, has a chance to have a monster year. But you work your way down, and guys who could come off the bench. I mean, KJ Tenner was a big-time recruit to Drake and went to follow Darren DeVries to West Virginia. And Ramon Domon is a guy who gets NBA talk out of France, who's coming over for college hoops. He's probably off the bench on this group. You mentioned Anderson. He's probably coming off the bench early on, right? So the depth and the quality, from 6 to 12 is huge. Now, how much do you value that, Greg? I think is an open question as you kind of build out these rankings, because at the end of the day, you can only have put 5 guys on the floor, right? And if you can, consolidate your resources on a couple of studs, that can change the game. But I look at this group and I see talent enough to be in the upper echelon of the Valley, and certainly the depth to give Ryan Miller a lot of options in year one to kind of figure out some of these lineup combinations that work.
Yep, absolutely. I do think that this is going to be a very talented team, and I think right away, even though they've got a fresh coaching staff, that they're going to be a force out there in the Valley. As joining me on the show, we do have Kevin Sweeney, who does such great work over at Sports Illustrated SI, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops for the Missouri Valley Conference Preview Edition. And for Indiana State, going to look to improve that defense outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but certainly no shortage of offense last year. They're going to be bringing back Camp Wagner, who is able to shoot about 38% from three-point range. Marcus Harding at 6'10" is able to light it up from 3. Sterling Young was really good over at Florida A&M as he put up 17 points per game. It's a really interesting team with NL St. Bernard coming on over from Panola Junior College, one of the better JUCO guys out there as well. And I'm very curious to see if Indiana State is able to be a little bit more complete, because with Indiana State, when they got clean looks, they knocked them down, but the turnovers and the defense were a little bit of a killer last year.
I totally echo the defensive front. It's something I worry about, but at the same time, as you said, I mean, the offense has a chance to be really, really good. And, I also would point out that, guys who in the past had maybe struggled with efficiency really all put it together last year in that system. And so, someone like Sterling Young, who was good at Florida A&M, who's a bucket getter, can he have the type of jump that Samaje Teal made? I don't think anyone necessarily saw him emerging into one of the best players in the Valley last season in the preseason, and that's exactly what he did. He was electric down the stretch. I mean, I remember that he had a game late in the year against Illinois State where he had 36, and they're going to miss that certainly, but I think there's two sides to that coin, and that's that the system that Matt Graves runs offensively is pretty aesthetically pleasing and should make life easy for guys like Sterling Young and Xavier Hall.
Yep, absolutely. I do think that for Indiana State, it's going to be a fun team to watch. Again, if they can find a little bit more defense, I think that there's going to be a bit of upside here. There's obviously upside with this team. Drake just finds ways to be able to bring in great coaches, and I think that they did a good job once again bringing in Eric Henderson from South Dakota State. He brings with him Owen Larson, who he was rock solid over at South Dakota State last year, 9 points per contest, shot over 38% from three. Jalen Quinn, a part-time starter over at Loyola Chicago, joins the fold. You're bringing in Jashawn Thomas, who's over at Charlotte, and Ian Henderson. He knows how to coach. He's always been able to get the most out of South Dakota State. We saw what he was able to do with Oscar Clough last season, and I do think that for Drake, even though they might not win the conference once again this year, I think that once again they made the best of the situation, and we saw what happened with Ben McCollum last year.
Yeah, I mean, no question. I give Henderson a lot of credit for what he did last year with a very unproven South Dakota State team. I don't have the number in front of me, but I pulled it right when he got the job. I think South Dakota State and Duke were the only two teams in the country that played 4 freshmen in their rotation and still won 20 games. You just don't win with that level of youth in this day and age. And they're going to have to rely on some of these younger guys here this year as well, because they don't bring in a ton of, proven talent. But I do think the backcourt with Jalen Quinn and Jashawn Thomas and Larson is a good start. I think Braden Applehans is a big-time shooter and someone that you can use in a similar way to like how Henderson used Baylor Shireman back in the day. They're both like these big, long, lefty perimeter shooters that I think have a chance to tap into some upside. I just worry about the front court with this group. I think that's the thing that maybe holds them back from being in the upper echelon of the league this year.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that with this group, they're once again going to be very rock solid. Again, I don't know if you can duplicate what you did last year, but this is still a team that I think is going to once again be very rock solid. And Drake, it doesn't matter who's coaching them. They always seem to be towards the top of the Missouri Valley Conference, as Bradley does, as Brian Wardle has done just such an incredible job ever since he took over the Braves. They were second in the nation in three-point shooting percentage. Now they lose a lot of those three-point shooters, but Alex, I always get this last name incorrect. Hiva Garstay, he comes in from Wright State after he shot from three-point range right around about 37.5%, 13.5 points per game. Ahmet Janovic, a true 7'1" big man, is back. And while they lose a lot of the big-time guys, the guys like Corey Thomas and company, the ancillary guys who came off the bench and shot threes, they're going to be back as well. And I know that Brian Wardle is going to do a great job of getting this team to fire on all cylinders from three, and they always play solid defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think you trust a Wardle team, you trust the defense. I think Jaquan Johnson probably is next in line. I mean, Bradley's had so many of these like really effective small guards. Duke Dean last year. There've been so many of them in Wardle's tenure. I think he's the next one. And then I'd also highlight a freshman who I think has a chance to be pretty darn good and pretty quickly too, Dietrich Richardson, a local kid that they really wanted and had some high major looks at one point, ends up going to Bradley. And I think he's someone that he has the positional size, he has the athleticism, he has the speed, he has the playmaking ability. I wouldn't be surprised if he's, a factor in their rotation in year one.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that he is going to be a big giant factor for them. And then when it comes to this bunch, I feel like they're just being left behind in this conference. It's Valparaiso, and they bring in a few solid players like Owen Dees was solid when he was over at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Isaiah Barnes was able to put up some relatively solid numbers over at Tulsa, but you can tell that this team was very much hurt by the injury bug. All right, and that is a very interesting name, by the way. He was so good in the backcourt, they lose him to the transfer portal as well. Just feels like this team got cannibalized, and not having a ton of size, you do have a few guys like Dees and Barnes that are right around about 6'7", but not really having that true proven big man. I think it's going to be rough for them in this conference.
Yeah, obviously another program that's fighting more with a knife than a gun in the NIL wars, and obviously felt that with All Right and Cooper Schwieger, two huge pieces that head out. But even like role players like Nick Schmidt, you lose him to Towson, I believe. Jefferson, De La Cruz, Monegros off to Fullerton. They just couldn't retain what was a pretty effective nucleus. And so, it takes a toll to be kind of constantly in the rebuild mode. I did like what they did, kind of moneyballing it here with some of these non-Division I guys, in addition to, you mentioned Barnes and Dees. I mean, Sean Tupuola is like a massive specimen of a big man who comes in, I believe, from the NIIA ranks. Brody Whitaker, another guy out of the non-Division I realm that I think will make some shots. And then one freshman, Carter Hopoy, I actually saw him play in the FIBA U19 World Cup. I thought he brought some good energy. He's a good developing front court prospect to keep an eye on. But the concern is, can you build enough momentum to really climb the ladder? Or are you just treading water? You lose two studs, and maybe you find a couple hidden gems, but that just keeps you where you were. And now you lose those two studs that you just developed. It's a tricky it's a tricky hamster wheel to get stuck on.
Yep, it certainly is. And then we've got one last team to take a look at, and that would be Southern Illinois. As for Southern Illinois, it felt like towards the back half of the season with Scott Nagy's team, they were able to figure it out. They were very inconsistent towards the front half of the season. Obviously, they have to rebuild a little bit. And hey, we were just talking about Valparaiso. Isaiah Stafford, their top scorer from 2 years ago, he comes into the fold, so that should be able to help them out quite a bit. Prince Aljibi, he's going to be coming in. He's about 6'7", offers a little bit of versatility there, and I like Kelron House coming in as well. How do you take a look at this Southern Illinois team? One that under Scott Nagy, when he was over at Wright State, the offense was so explosive, and I felt like we saw a little bit more of that offensive explosiveness towards the back half of the season last year.
I trust Nagy offensively, as you sort of alluded to there, and I think they have a little bit more firepower now to add House and Stafford, Prince Aligbe, and I also think Max Picard is a guy who comes in from St. Louis who just wasn't physically ready to play last year at SLU, but is a guy who can protect the rim, who has a level of skill, who can handle on the perimeter. That is something that is really valuable in that system, and I think he's someone that could emerge pretty quickly. But I also think you'll see at times them go small with Aligbe at the 5 and really space it out, open up the floor for guys like House and Stafford. So yeah, I think they'll score. I'm not sure how they'll guard. I doubt this team is a disaster. I think they'll probably wind up somewhere in the middle.
Yep, I think so as well with Southern Illinois. Always a bunch that has been very interesting over the last few years. Obviously undergoing a new style with Scott Nagy coming in there for year number 2. It's going to be fun to watch them. And this entire Missouri Valley Conference is always a lot of fun to be taking a look at. I know that you always do a tremendous job of taking a look at this great conference, Kevin. You've got your finger on the pulse of a little bit of everything with regards to college basketball, and I know you're hard at work getting stuff for the upcoming season. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, we're getting geared up for the season over at SI. Had our 101 days countdown story about a week ago that you can go check out, but other than that, right now a lot of it's in the lab, trying to get some of these previews knocked out that will come out here over September and October. Give me time to go out and see some practices, see some high-level, early season competition in October and November, which I always really enjoy. So looking forward to stay tuned, SI.com, and also the Scout Team Pod with Fawcett is a big-time one on YouTube. You can check that out as well.
Absolutely, and I know that in terms of getting set for the upcoming college basketball season, Kevin is one of the best in the business. He grinds all 12 months out of the year. He does a lot of work at a lot of different outlets, and every single time he joins me, he lends such great insight. So big thanks, Kevin, for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and coming next, since it is the Missouri Valley Conference Preview Edition, I give you my projector of finish for the conference.
This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
We're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. This is the Missouri Valley Conference Preview Edition, and every single year. Kevin Sweeney always joins me for this podcast. He does such a magnificent job over there at Sports Illustrated, SI, Field of 68, and so much more. It was great to be able to get him aboard today. So a big thanks to Kevin for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And now it is that time of the podcast that I give you my projector or finish for the Missouri Valley Conference. Now, the one thing I will say before I go forward is that any news and notes I might have missed in college basketball on Tuesday, I'm going to polish those up on the podcast tomorrow. I always want to give as much sparkle and shine to these conference previews as humanly possible because we want these to be a little bit more evergreen, and I do want to make sure that every one of these conferences, they get dissected in the proper amount of insight. So I do always leave these free of the news and notes. We'll get those all for you tomorrow if I miss anything on Tuesday. But let's take a look at number 11, dead last in my projector or finish. That'd be Valparaiso. Now, they do add in there a few solid pieces. Isaiah Barnes, who comes over from Tulsa, he was a starter the last 2 years, and last year, 9.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, shot 33% from 3 at 6'7". That's a good place to start. And for Owen Dees, he's a relatively rock-solid player as well. Was over at Texas A&M Corpus Christi last year, 6'8", little bit of a combo player, shoots about 38% from 3, 10 points, 4 rebounds per game, but they're not necessarily big enough to be able to thrive in the Missouri Valley Conference. They just don't have a lot of backcourt play either. Like, if you're taking a look at the, shall we say, ball handler position, you're probably looking at Mark Brown Jr. doing a little bit of something for you. He's coming up from the non-Division I ranks, so you do have to have quite a bit of question mark there. Justice McNair is coming over, and he was able to give the team about 4.5 points per contest last year, shot 31% from 3. He's not necessarily too much of a ball handler. You've got a lot of Division II guys, NAIA guys. They're trying to play essentially, as it was called by Kevin Sweeney, Moneyball here, and I just don't know if it's going to be able to work out for them. It just feels like a roster in this conference that's going to be eaten alive. So, dead last in my projector or finish, I'm going to be going with Valparaiso. At number 10, I'm going with Indiana State. I just have no faith in this defense. 313th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and you lose a lot of those top scorers from a season ago. Now, they pick up Sterling Young from Florida A&M, 17 points per game, 35% three-point shooter. That's pretty rock solid. And overall, this was a team that was in the top 100 in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. NL St. Bernard, he comes over from Panola Junior College. He was able to give 7.5 boards, 2.5 blocks per game, so he should be able to hop out down low. And Derek Force, he's a 6'10" big man that is back after averaging about 4.3 rebounds per game. But here's the big thing for this team. Who's going to be running the point for them? Because they were 317th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis committed on offense. When you're outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and you're not taking care of the ball on offense, that just is a big, giant issue. You've got Bruno Alcen, who was able to give the team 5.5 points, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, and Camp Wagner is back, 10 points per game, shot 38% from 3. So those are two relatively rock-solid pieces, but I do think that this is just a very bare roster. It's not necessarily a system that I love, and I think that they're going to struggle this year. So at number 10 in my projector finish, I'm going to be going with Indiana State. At number 9, I go with Evansville. Evansville, a really nice turnaround last year, and I like the fact that they bring in Keyshawn Porter from NC Central. He was able to give that team 10.5 points, 3.5 boards, a little bit over a steal per game, shot 37% from three-point range. They're bringing in a pair of upside guys, Marlon Barnes, 6'6" wing that was on the bench over at Pittsburgh last season, AJ Casey, a former top 150 recruit of Miami, he was over at St. Louis last season, just wasn't able to get out there on the floor for them. Now, this team is going to need to build themselves up from three-point range. I was talking about how so many teams shot so well from three-point range in the first segment. This team was not one of them. 344th in the country with that regard, and when it comes to their road three-point shooting percentage at 24.6%, that was 363rd. They also didn't grab a lot of offensive rebounds, so you do have 6'10" Connor Turnbull, 9 points, 4 boards, 2 blocks per contest, relatively rock solid down low. And I think that Alex Hemingway, who comes on over from Clemson, where he played just 5 games the last 2 seasons, but during the 2022-23 season, he was a 47% three-point shooter. He should be able to elevate that offense a little bit, but I just don't know if it's going to be quite enough for this team to really hit the accelerator. Joshua Hughes is also back, 7 points, 5 boards per contest, but it just feels like they don't necessarily have the dudes to be able to be super competitive in this conference. So at number 9 in my projector finish, I'm going to be going with Evansville. At number 8, I do go with the Salukis of Southern Illinois. Scott Nagy always does a great job of being a coach up offense, but the question becomes, what are you going to be able to get on the defensive side of things? And also, what are you going to be able to get out of Isaiah Stafford? Because with Stafford, when he was over at Valparaiso 2 seasons ago, 17 points per game, 2 assists, wasn't a great three-point shooter, but he did a little bit of everything for that team. He missed all of last season due to major surgery due to a rough injury. That's not what you want, but you do have Prince Eligibe. Hopefully I said that correct. He at 6'7", is able to give you some rebounds. He's going to be able to help out down low. Drew Stife is someone that I'm relatively bullish on as well. Stife is someone that comes back from a season ago as a little bit of a combo guy that I think is going to be able to make some good contributions. And for Southern Illinois, they were able to keep a few of these pieces around from a season ago, so that helps you feel good. Davion Sykes was able to give the team in that neighborhood about 5 points per contest, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, so nothing overly amazing there. Stife, he was more of a 38% three-point shooter, but I do think that also providing a little bit of upside is what you're going to be able to get out of Quelleron House. Quelleron House last season was over at Jacksonville State. He was the Conference USA, I believe, all freshman of the year last year, 8.5 points per contest, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range. He's only 5'11", but he's able to give you 3 assists per game. That's going to be able to give this team just a little bit more in terms of being able to take care of the ball. Southern Illinois last year had a very tough time with regards to turnovers last season. I think that they're going to be a little bit just cleaner in terms of their offense. As a matter of fact, 12.5 turnovers per game last season, and they do need to shut down the three-point arc as well, outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage last year, so that was a little bit of an issue, but overall I do take a look at Southern Illinois. I think that they're going to be towards the middle part of the conference, so I've got them at number 8 in terms of my projector finish. At number 7, I'm going to be going with Illinois Chicago UIC. Rob-a-San, I thought, did a really good job with this bunch, getting them tied for 5th, 500 in the conference after this team had been really miring in mediocrity. They get back Ahmad Henderson, 11.5 points, 2.5 assists per game, not a flamethrower from 3, shot about 34%, but also shot 90% at the free throw line as well. That's always something that you take, especially if you're a bettor and you're in a little bit of a tricky spot and you're laying the points. So I think that that's going to be very good for them. And what else is going to be very good is bringing in Sam Silverstein, as he was able to log about 4 points, 6 rebounds per game over at Cal Baptist last season. Elijah Crawford never really got out there on the floor for BYU, but he's a former top 175 recruit. Should be able to give this team a little bit of versatility out there on the three-point arc. And Chris Walker, he comes over from Binghamton after he was averaging about 11.5 points, 4 boards, 2 assists, 43% three-point shooter. Antti Beljan, he should be able to give you some good production at 6'8"-ish, about 4.5 rebounds per game. And Abdul Mamoa, when he was over at Central Arkansas, recognized he's a little bit undersized at about 6'7", but and he was able to give a block and a half per contest, did a relatively solid job on the glass. This is a UIC team that did a good job of not allowing a lot of second and third chances last season. They do need to clean up the 12 turnovers per game, but I'm feeling relatively bullish about this UIC Flames team. I think that they're right towards the middle of the conference. I've got them number 7 in terms of my projector or finish. This is going to be dicey, but at number 6 in my projector or finish, I'm going with Drake. You have to completely overhaul everything from what Ben McCollum was able to do last season, and it was a magical year for Drake. And Drake obviously doing a great job of hiring out coaches. Mr. DeVries, Ben McCollum, and now you're on Eric Henderson, who I loved what he was able to do with the South Dakota State Jackrabbits last season. He brings over Owen Larson with him, 9 points, 4 boards, 2.5 assists, shot 38.5% from three-point range. Jalen Quinn was a part-time starter over at Loyola Chicago last year, 7 points per game. Deshaun Thomas, he's able to give you about 9.5 points per contest, high 30s three-point shooter. And Oku Frederico, he was over at South Carolina last season. He comes on over from Finland, was unable to get out there on the floor, but he's a 6'9", little bit of a rim protector guy that should be able to help out right away. And then you got Isaiah Carr, who comes on over from Denver. I think he's a little bit of an X factor, limited to 12 games last season due to injury, so you don't know what you're going to get from him right away, but a little bit over a block, 6 points, 4.3 rebounds per game. We saw what Henderson was able to do with Oscar Clough last season, so he's got a good track record of success there. Eric Henderson just always does a great job of being able to coach up this team. I think that it's going to be a little bit tough with having to replace pretty much 100% of guys from a season ago, but Brandon Applehans, he was a 43% three-point shooter last season over at New Mexico. I think that he offers a little bit of upside for running this style. So in terms of my projector finish, at number 6, I've got the Drake, and at number 5, I'm going with Belmont. For Belmont, I absolutely love the offense. Tyler Lundblade, a 48% three-point shooter, a guy that's able to go ballistic from the outside. Team was overall 17th in the country in three-point shooting percentage. They're 40.6% road three-point shooting percentage. That was second in all of college basketball. They're also 316th in opponents' two-point shooting percentage, 261st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And Sam Orme, he's going to need to build off the 9.5 points, 4 boards per contest. He shot 37.5% from 3. Nick McLean, he was able to give the team about 10.5 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, about 2 steals per game while he was over at Eastern Washington last season. So they're getting a really nice stat sheet stuffer there. And Aiden Noyes, he comes in after he was able to log about 4 points per contest last season. He should be able to give this team a bit of, shall we say, versatility, and at 6'9", he's going to be able to help out down low. Also shot 38% from three-point range. So for Belmont, feel very good about the offense. Feeling a little bit rough about the defense. Nick McLean comes on over from an Eastern Washington team that also didn't play a lot of defense. So at number 5, in terms of my projector or finish, I'm going with Belmont. At number 4, I do go with the Braves of Bradley. And Bradley has to replace all those good guards in the backcourt from a season ago. But they do bring back 7'1" Amit Yanovich. He was very rock solid down low, 4.5 boards, 5.5 points per game. Need him to be a little bit more assertive with regards to blocking shots, but he should be able to help out this team. And then you've got AJ Smith, who he was a part-time starter last year with about 7.5 points, 6.5 boards per contest over at James Madison. Jaquan Johnson, as we heard from Kevin Sweeney, he's probably going to be running the show for the team. And I mean, off the bench, 6.5 points, 2.5 assists, 1.5 steals per contest, shot 35% from three. He's got all the goods. Mayor Wool, who was over at Eastern Kentucky last season, about 9 points, 5 rebounds per game at 6'8", and then 6'9" Corey Thomas was shooting 37% from three last season off the bench. You've got good versatility with Bradley. Alex Huber-Gersay, 13.5 points, 3 assists per contest. He should be able to help out in that backcourt as well. For Bradley, I do think that they take a little bit of a setback because they do lose so many pieces in the backcourt, but I mean, it's a case where with Brian Wardle, he doesn't just rebuild the backcourt, he reloads. So do think that they're still going to be towards the top of the conference. I've got Bradley at number 4 in terms of my projector or finish. And number 3, I'm feeling good about this Murray State team. They move on from Steve Prohm. They hire on Ryan Miller, who is a top assistant over at Creighton, and he brings with him Frederick King. Now, for Frederick King, he only averaged about 2.7 points per game last year. He averaged fewer than 7 minutes per game, but what I'm taking a look at is when this guy got them some starting opportunities whenever Ryan Kalkbrenner was out. He got a few of them 2 seasons ago when Ryan Kalkbrenner was out due to mono. He made 4 starts in his career over at Creighton. In those 4 starts, 12.5 points, 6.5 boards, 3.8 blocks per contest. You bring in Lane Taylor, who was over at Central Arkansas last season, 17.5 points, 3.5 assists, nearly 2 steals per contest, shot about 34% from 3. And then they say within the conference for this one, Javon Jackson, guy that was able to log about 11.5 points per contest, comes in. JJ Traynor, he was able to come in from DePaul, 5.5 points, 3.5 boards, began his career over at Louisville. You got a lot of good pieces, including Dylan Anderson, a true 7-footer that at Boise State last year shot 38.5% from three-point range. I'm feeling really good about this roster that Mr. Miller built, and as a result, I've got Murray State at number 3 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 2, I'm going with Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa brings back so many pieces from a team that was just so well put together last year. Trey Campbell, 11 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, 43% three-point shooter. This is a team that overall was very lethal from three-point range. Now, they did have some demonstrative home and road splits with regards to that three-point shooting, but I mean, still, this team was a top 40 team with regards to their three-point shooting. Ben Schwieger is back, 5 boards, 36.5% three-point shooter with 10 points per contest. Leon Bond, he missed about 10 games last season. Getting a full year out of him as a nice little do-it-all combo guy with 9.5 points, 4.5 boards. Love him. And then Max Weisbrod, he was a really good sharpshooter off the bench, shot 40.5% from 3 with 6 points per contest. I really love this team. They don't bring in a lot via the transfer portal or anything like that, but they don't really need to because they retain so many pieces, sans Titan Anderson from season ago, and I do think that they're going to tighten up and be really good in this conference. I've got them at number 2 in terms of my projector or finish, but there can only be number one, and I'm going with Illinois State. Illinois State is running it back from a season ago. They bring back 3 of their top 4 scorers from last season. You just don't see this in this day and age in college basketball, whether that be high major or low major. Trace Walker, 15 points, 6 boards, 2 assists, mid-30s three-point shooter, just a disruptor in all facets of the game. Bowden Skunberg was supposed to be a big-time scorer for the team. He missed all of last season due to injury 2 years ago, and he was over at North Dakota State. 14 points, 5 boards, 2 assists. You've got Ty Pence back in the fold as well. For Mr. Pence, he was able to do a nice job of giving the team right around about 7.5 points per game, shot 36.5% from three-point range, and then Jack Daughtry, a 47% three-point shooter. He's back from a season ago. And then Landon Moore. He was over at Butler last season. Didn't see a lot of run when he was over at Butler. If you take a look at the 2022-23 season over at St. Francis of Pennsylvania, I think that this is a little bit more of what you could expect out of him when he was averaging 13 points, 3.5 assists, shot 36% from three-point range. I feel really good about this Illinois State team. They do want to be a bit better on defense. They were 273rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but still, an elite three-point shooting team, shooting 37.1% from the outside, 30th in all of college basketball. They bring back Johnny Kinzinger, who was able to give the team 14.5 points himself. I really love the way that this backcourt is put together. So as a result, number one in my projector finish, I'm going with Illinois State. And that'll wrap things up for the Missouri Valley Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks once again to Kevin Sweeney. Does such a tremendous job over at Sports Illustrated, aka SI. He joined me in the last segment, and I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
DC politicians want to enact harmful credit card mandates that could take away your cash back and rewards points. Perks that stretch your budget and make life a little easier. Losing these benefits means less money for your family's everyday essentials like gas and groceries. The perks you rely on could disappear, leaving you with higher costs and fewer options. Tell Congress to guard your card and oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card mandates.
Paid for by Electronic Payments Coalition.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. That's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter.com/zip.